Graphs are on page 8. I can connect contextual situations to graphs of functions and vice versa. So looking at a graph and writing a story about it, looking at a story and putting a graph to it. It says, a scout ant discovers sugar is spilled on Karen's kitchen countertop. The ant marks straight trail from the sugar back. Looking at this. So the ant marks a straight trail from the sugar back to the hole in the wall where the ant can crawl directly onto the countertop. The sugar is 8 feet from the hole in the wall. So when you look at the graph, we're looking at the ant and the sugar. Notice on the y-axis going up, it tells us that that's our distance from the opening in the wall in feet, and this is our time in seconds. So it says at time 0, the worker ant crawls onto the countertop from the wall entrance. The ant follows the trail for 4 seconds and travels 5 feet. So we can see, travels 5 feet in our time of 4 seconds, right? So we're going 4 seconds, it went 5 feet. So we could find that rate of change. The ant then stops for 2 seconds and checks for danger. So here's our 2-second stop. Our slope here is 0, right, when we look at that. It continues on the path and arrives at the sugar 4 seconds later. 4 seconds later, we're going from 6 up to 10. It arrives there. And it collects the sugar for 4 seconds, and it crawls directly back to the wall entrance. The worker ant is on the kitchen counter for 18 seconds. So if we are asked to look at this, to label the parts of the graph that are shown at the right, okay? So what you are going to be doing is we are going to kind of be looking at that. So could we find our slope here? M is equal to what? How far did we rise up? We rose up 5 feet. In how many seconds? 2. Careful, look at your scale. This is where some of you miss something. In 4. So if I divide 5 by 4, that comes out to be 1 1/4, right? Foot per second. Here, we're not moving, right? What is our slope at this point? The slope here is 0, right? We are not rising at all. We are staying here. We are looking our slope at being our rise. We are going from 5 up to 8, which means my rise is 3 feet. In how many seconds? So we're going from 6, right, to 10, which is 4 seconds. So could we say that our slope here, M, is equal to 3/4 of a foot per second, right, if we are looking at that? What's our slope on the top? Same as it was here, right? This slope is exactly the same. M is 0. We are not rising. We're just sitting there, right? So it doesn't have, the slope is 0. And then this last one, we go from 14 seconds to 18 seconds, which means when I look at my change, I am going down, so it's a negative. How many feet are we traveling? Negative 8 feet over what? If we are looking at that, 8 feet over how much time? 16 to 18 gives us 2 seconds, which means that that rate of change is going to be a negative 4 feet per second, if we are looking at that. So 4 feet per second. So when we look at our graphs, we kind of want to be thinking about what does the story tell us about our graph as we are looking at it. So on this next page down, we are going to be looking at this graph, and if we're thinking about the story for this last one, this is kind of the story part. This is where it's telling us this would be my part A. What was happening at part A? He's traveling at 5 feet per second. This would maybe be my part B. He stood still or waited to check for danger. This would be part C of the graph, part D, and then part E. What you are going to be asked in your test, and as we do your homework, is to come up with what's happening at each part of the story, right, of the graph. So when you take a look at that, it says here are 2 other ants that are found, that found sugar. And in this one it says on the countertop, the graphs are shown below. Describe the story. So if we are thinking about the different parts, this is going to be like my part A. This is going to be B. Is this one taking as much time? This second graph that we are looking at compared to our first one? No, they finished in like 9 seconds, right? So this ant was going much faster as we are looking at it. So we want to take a look at this, and what is this one telling us? So we want to start off as we are writing this, and I want you to write this, that the ant follows the same path, right? So ant follows the same path. You're going to want to start writing with me so that we're not waiting later for you to keep writing, okay? So follows the same path, right? When we look at that ant, P-A-T-H, path, same path. It takes, but this time, it only takes how many seconds? Only takes 9 seconds for our trip. My slope is different, right? Much steeper. Slopes of A is we went up 5 feet in 2 seconds, right? 5 feet per 2 seconds, which comes out to be, if we are looking at that, 2.5 feet, right, per second. We're not resting as long either, are we? We're only resting or checking for danger in this one. But then we do have that slope of 0. So then our slope equals 0. What is our slope of C? Is he still going pretty fast, right? We are going from, kind of looks like at about 3 seconds to 7 seconds, right? So if we were looking at that, we could say we went up from 5 to 8, we went up 4, right? If we are looking at that, 5 to 8, actually not 4, but should be what? 5 to 8 is how much feet? 3 feet, thank you. 3 feet over, it still looks like 2 seconds, right? 3 feet over 2 seconds is going to equal 1.5 foot per second. So we can see our slopes are quite a bit different. And then that last one, we're going to end with a slope of what? We're going 8 feet. So it's negative 8 feet in how many seconds? 2 seconds. So is that the same? That one is exactly the same as our last one. We still have a negative 4 feet per second, right? So by saying it follows the same path of the other one, I don't have to say that it's taking off from its home and doing all of that. Whereas this next one, it's kind of not the same pattern, right? In this one, is our ant checking for any kind of danger at all? No, it's just going straight to the sugar, getting the sugar, and then it goes back. Does it go back as fast? Definitely not. And if you think about that, maybe the reason it doesn't go back as fast is it took a lot longer to eat the sugar, right? And so it's kind of taking it longer to go back. So if we wanted to put this one down, I'm going to have you look at this. And I'll give you a few seconds to look at this, but this is kind of what I'm looking at. I don't need you to have exactly everything written here, but it's not on the same pattern. It crawls 6 seconds and goes directly to the sugar spill without stopping. It collects the sugar this time for 6 seconds. So it's crawling for 6 seconds. It is sitting still and eating the sugar for 6 seconds. And then it goes back to the wall a little slower. The whole trip, and the trip back was 8 seconds. So this was a much longer trip in seconds. This one took 20 seconds total. And I'll give you a minute so that it kind of makes sense to you. So on the top of the next page and putting those slopes, all that extra information is going to help me show what you know. So not only giving the story part, but telling me how fast they're going. Here they are just sitting still, right? So we're not moving at all. It's just sitting there eating the sugar. And now it's going back to the wall to get away from the people that might be trying to kill it on its counter, right? So you have analyzing graphs. You have ant A, ant B, and ant C, as we are looking at. So these are our 3 graphs we just looked at. It says which graph above shows that the ant collects the sugar for 4 seconds. So we need to see the time period being 4 seconds, which should be, and which one? Collects it that sits up at the 8 feet for 4 seconds. Should be ant. This one is 4, this one is, about 2, this one is definitely, we are looking at that 6. So it should be A. The ant that returns to the wall after half the time required of the original. Well, remember our original one went up to 20 if we were looking at that. That was our ant A. So if we're looking at less than half of that, we should have ant B. In the next one, it says the ant crawled partway towards the sugar at 2.5 feet per second. So if we are looking at that, 2.5 feet per second. So let's take a look at this one. We want to find each of these slopes, right? So count it going towards it. So this one is, if we are looking at it, our scale here is 3. Our M here is 8 divided by 3. Our slope here is going from 2 to 6. How many seconds are we talking about? If it goes from 2 to 6, we're talking about 4 seconds in our denominator. How far did we go up? 5 seconds, right? Or 5, in this case, feet, right? When we take a look at that. So do either of those come out to equal 2.5? No. This one's going to be 1 1/4, right? This one is going to be 2 1/3, or 2 2/3. And if we look at this one, so we think it's this one, and if we are looking at this slope, right, we are going up 5, and in how many seconds? 2. So 5 feet, 2 seconds. So we kind of need to sometimes analyze our graphs when we are looking at those, and this one should be choice B. Make sure you put those 3 slopes by each of those graphs. So write it by each one of those. Make sure you have this information in your notes so that as we are looking that you had 8 over 3, 5 over 2, and the 5 over 4 as we look at those. So then the next question says, okay, which ants stood still for a total of 6 seconds? If we are looking at it, it should be choice C. Which one is standing still for 6? So it should be choice C if we look at that one. Is A also? Why do they have A and C? This one's a total of 6, but this is a total of 4 up here, plus the 2 here. This one was standing still when it wasn't moving, right? For those first 2 seconds. So that's why you want to have both A and C. Crawling at the slowest rate. Which one do we believe is going at the slowest rate as we look at those? It should be A as we look at it. Notice our lines are not as steep, right? So when we talk about the rate, we're talking about the steepness of the lines. B has very steep lines and C's are pretty steep. This one is pretty steep, but these first 2, not as steep as we are looking at those. As we take a look, the ant that crawled at the fastest rate, that is probably going to be, the steepest line should be B, as we are looking at that. And the distances that the ant traveled was 16 feet. Which ants traveled 16 feet total? Did A? Going from 0 up to 8 and 8 to 0? No. So you go 8 there, right? You go 8 back. B goes 8 there and 8 back. C goes 8 there and 8 back. Which ones all traveled 16 feet? All of them. A, B, and C. All of the graphs show this. Okay. So in your homework tonight, it's not going to be so much about the ants. Again, we're going to do one more with making graphs with ants. Then we're going to take your quiz as we are taking a look at this. So in this one, your homework, they're going to give you different stories. It might be about people walking or doing other things as we look at this. So in this question, as we are reading, Dan, you want to do me a favor and read, please?
The first one?
Just where it says first the following stories, and then, yeah, the first one.
The following stories are modifications of the original story. Draw a graph to illustrate each story. The scene is the same as the original story on the first page of our notes today. A second ant slips through the wall onto the kitchen counter at a time of t equals 2 seconds, and then for 8 seconds follows the trail directly to the sugar.
Okay, so let's stop at that point. What is that looking like? It starts, it leaves its hole here, right? And it stays there, comes outside for 2 seconds. Then for 8 seconds, it travels directly to the sugar. Where is our sugar? At how many feet away? Up at 8, right? So our sugar is at 8. And how long does it do that? So if we are looking at this one, it says for the next 8 seconds, directly to the sugar. So 2, 4, 6, 8. So at 10, you're going to go all the way up to this 8. So please put a point over at 10, 8, because it stood still for 2. You're connecting this to this point, which is located at 2, 0. You're connecting that to 10, 8. That's this point. So you're going to connect those two with a nice straight line. If we continue reading, Caitlin, then what does it do?
It collects sugar for 3 seconds and crawls directly back into the wall entrance. The return of the sugar to the wall takes 5 seconds.
So we have to go 3 seconds of eating, so that's going to end up right here in the middle, right? So it's going to be at time 15, 8, right? So 3, if we are looking at that, 10 should be 13, not 15. 13, 8, right? And now it's going to crawl back in 5 seconds. So we're at 13. This would give us 1 second, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's going to return by 18, correct? We're going to connect this point for our graph. So when you are looking at the stories, this is what you're going to be asked to do. What I would like you to do is, as we read this next one, I want you to try and draw it. So the third ant slips through the wall at time equals 4. Okay, time equals 4. It arrives at the sugar. The sugar is still at the same place, right? Sugar is always at 8. Sugar is at 8. That's where our sugar is. That's how far away it is, okay? It collects sugar for 2 seconds before it's frightened and crawls back to the wall in 5 seconds. So if we are looking at yours, hopefully you have something like this where your sugar was at 8. You started off, right, for 4 seconds, if we were looking at that. So starting at that 4 seconds. Then we had to end up, graph. Okay. So then when we were looking at that, just to make sure that yours makes sense as you take a look at that. Questions? Okay. So, your homework tonight, like I said, we're going to have this quiz in just a minute. As you look at your homework, we are going to be trying to decide as we look at these, as you read the questions and as you are looking at them, what is our rate of change? Is it positive? Is it negative as we are looking at these?